Duh.
Yeah, and so they were probably all asleep, or maybe they were partying so hard and so loud they didn't hear their phones going off.
Maybe.
At 1:54 a.m., he called his parents.
Oh,
yeah.
That has just got to be...
That's just the call you want to get.
Humiliating is all, yeah.
What
to have to do.
You know, my brother, when he was in situations like that, would just call me. Because I was lame. I was a lame older sister and just, like, was always home. All right, I was asleep, but yeah, I'll come pick you up.
Yeah. But, yeah, sooner or later, when nobody else is picking up, you got to call the parents. And that's what he did. His parents are Brian and Annette Swanson. And, by the way, they are still wondering what the hell happened to Brandon.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, if you're listening, please call home. Brian and Annette got into the family pickup truck, and they left to go find Brandon.
Now, he had committed some navigational errors.
Yeah, I was going to say, he probably wasn't super sure where he was.
Nah, he was way off. This is what doomed their rescue mission, because Brandon told them he was stuck just off Highway 23 near Lind, between Lind and Marshall.
Which is way farther south.
It's like 20 miles away.
Yeah.
And this, to me, is one of the most truly puzzling things about this story, is that how he could possibly have believed that he was anywhere near Lind when he was so far away.
So I thought about that, and I have an idea.
Really?
Okay, he knew how long it took to go from town A to town B on the highway. Let's just say 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So he's been driving on these dirt roads where he's got to go much slower and taking all these turns. And he's like, well, I've been driving for 30 or 40 minutes. I've got to be almost there. Because I've made that same mistake, because you don't think about the fact that you're not going in a straight line and you're going slower. So I can see how that is. But the other thing is that we are all spoiled today, and we think, well, I know somebody's going to say this, well, why didn't he just look at his phone and see what the map said? His phone wasn't capable.
It was a dumb phone. Yeah.
It was a Motorola Silver is what it was. I was reading about it, and it didn't have that capability. It could hold MP3s and play music, but it didn't have that internet capacity that you'd have to have for doing maps.
Yes, it was a silver, not a silver. I had one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, sorry. I just want to make sure
How
that
come you're still here? How come you haven't disappeared?
Yeah, I don't know. It was the flat version of the Razor.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I think they call that style the candy bar. Yeah. But
I thought it was the bread loaf. But
yeah.
Well,
good.
I guess I think also, it's not as though there are street signs on those dirt roads, those back roads, and I bet he thought he just turned the wrong way.
Well, they said that all the roads all look the same in that area, and I can believe it. I mean, I've been on Street View, and I've looked around the area, and it's flat.
Well, I was, that's funny as you say about the street signs, is that I was reading on one site, and it was the funniest thing. It was some wiki. And this is what cracked me up, is that somebody had gone through and written the wiki, and somebody else had come back through and edited and put all of their responses to statements in italics.
Those snarky comments.
Yes.
Is that the one that I put out there?
Yeah, you sent that one to me. Yeah, it cracked me up because it says there's no street signs. It says, yes, there are. They're everywhere. So it doesn't sound like it was completely unmarked. It probably wasn't every intersection, but it was probably a significant number of them.
Yeah,
should have given him some idea where he was.
Unless he wasn't paying attention to street
Which is probably what it was.
He was going the right way.
No, it's entirely possible. But no, I mean, if to wind up where he was, I could see where he would leave Canby and drive due east, but somehow in the mistaken belief that he was driving due south instead, and so that's entirely possible.
Yeah, it's totally possible out there.
But still, it's still kind of a mystery to me.
Yeah, we should probably get back to.
But it doesn't really matter. It was a huge navigational error. But Brian and Annette, Brandon's parents, got into the vicinity of Lind, which is only 6 miles away from their home in Marshall, so they got there very quickly. They started driving up and down the side roads. Brian was driving, Annette was on the phone with Brandon, and they were flashing their headlights and saying, "Hey, can you see our headlights flashing?" And Brandon was saying, "No. Can you see my headlights flashing?" And he was still with the car at this point in time.
Which is 20 miles away.
Yeah, 20 miles away.
No wonder you can't see them.
Obviously, not really surprising, nobody saw the flashing headlights. At this point, Brandon was apparently getting a little snippy with his mom and losing patience. And so Brandon's dad, dropped his mom off at home and went back out to look for Brandon again. He called him at 2:23 a.m., and they were on a long phone call for 47 minutes. Brandon had, at this point, left the car.
Which is not something you should be doing, but...
Well, in this particular case, it probably wasn't a good idea. But he left the car, and his intention was to walk into the town of Lind, which he still believed he was near. He was seeing glowing lights of a town nearby. The town, actually, I believe, was Porter.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, I think it was Porter.
Or what's the other one that starts with a T?
Yeah, Taunton.
Taunton. It's one of those two he had to be seeing.
Yeah, well, he was headed towards Porter.
Well, he was, yeah.
Yeah, he was.
So he tells him to meet him at the tavern.
Yeah, he told his dad to meet him in the parking lot of the Linwood Tavern in Lind, which, by the way, is still there. If you do a little Googling on them, they still have a webpage.
But Street View won't let you go into the bar to look around?
No, it won't.
Why haven't they done that yet?
Yeah, I know.
You know that's why Pokemon Go exists, right? No, seriously.
I knew you would. I'm amazed it took this long to work Pokemon Go into the episode.
That's the whole reason that it exists, is because Google wants to map the inside of buildings. And since, you have to take video all the time and you upload it to the cloud, that's how they're mapping it.
Oh, really? That's it?
Yep.
Oh, that makes sense.
That's devious.
That makes sense. I just want to say, and so tasteful that the Holocaust Museum is part of Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Back to the story, though. What were we talking about? So Brandon is out of the car, and he's heading towards what he thinks is the town of Lind, which is, in actuality, the town of Porter. Mm-hmm. So he's walking down, according to his father, he was walking down a gravel road towards Lind. At the end, he said he was cutting across a field to save time. He mentioned that he came across two fences, which I assume he climbed over.
He had to have.
Yeah. He said there was water nearby, which I am assuming was the Yellow Medicine River, which kind of meanders all throughout the area. You guys have seen the aerials. And then at 3:10, Brandon said, "Oh, in an alarm tone, and the phone went dead. And that's the last time anybody heard from Brandon Swanson." So obviously this set off a few alarm bells. The family kept searching all night, and they kept calling Brandon's phone, and the phone would ring several times, and then it would go to voicemail. Which
indicates that the phone was still on.
Apparently still on, but not necessarily 100% functional.
Not always. Because we've talked about this before, that a phone ringing doesn't necessarily mean that the phone is ringing.
Yeah,
the other phone is ringing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to make sure we talk about that, because we'll bring something up in theories in a minute.
Yeah, but no, people have read a lot into that, though, because for about a day and a half, until about Thursday afternoon, the phone would ring several times and then go to voicemail, and then starting about late on Thursday, it stopped ringing. And when you call it, it would just go straight to voicemail, which most people have interpreted as the phone was still on, and then the battery died, and at that point it started going directly to voicemail.
Okay.
Which is actually a reasonable interpretation. But apparently it does appear that the phone was not functioning.
And we don't know, because that was never found, nor was Brandon.
Phone was never found, so we don't really know. He could have, when his whole OS, I'll call it his whole OS moment. A lot of people have read that to be
his operating system moment.
Yeah, exactly. I've read that to be like, he was walking along, cutting through this field, and then suddenly a serial killer popped up with a chainsaw. Yeah, nobody knows, really. We really don't know.
So they looked for Brandon, obviously.
Yeah, they did. The police were notified at 6:30 a.m. that Brandon was missing. One of the first things, of course, that they did is they checked with Brandon's cell provider, and they found out that when he was talking to his parents on the phone, he was connected to a cell tower in Minneota. And sorry, Minnesota residents, if I've mispronounced that, but Minneota, which is several miles southeast of Taunton, which is the town that he was closest to. And that was definitely not the cell tower he would have been accessing if he was anywhere near the town of Lind, which, as I've said already, was way far away.
So that's how they kind of gave their initial circle of where to search at.
Yeah, exactly. And so they focused their efforts on the area around Highway 68 to the northwest of Marshall. And at 12:30 p.m. on the day of the 14th, the sheriff's deputy did find Brandon's car in the ditch, but there was no Brandon. Initial efforts were made to find him using dogs. These were kind of inconclusive. The next day, on Thursday, May 15th, they brought a bloodhound and used the bloodhound to track his trail from where he left the car.
And they gave
Probably so. Yeah.
The first dogs were just let to search without something.
Were they like cadaver dogs or something?
I don't know. I think they were actually tracker dogs, but they weren't bloodhounds.
Right, and there's a difference between bringing a dog in and trying to have it track a scent and giving it a scent.
Right. And but that's why my question is like, why weren't they just doing that in the first place? Why did they have to wait for the bloodhound? But whatever.
I don't know. It might be
the hourly rate for that bloodhound is much higher.
Yeah.
Because he knew Sherlock.
Yeah, not every county is going to necessarily have bloodhounds on hand. So, but anyway, they brought him in. The bloodhound tracked from the car, from where the car was, tracked his trail half-mile south and then a mile west towards Porter, about a half-mile north, and then he left the road and went across. And this totally tracks with what his father said he was talking about. He was talking about walking down gravel roads, and then he left the road and cut across an abandoned farm and his track was basically parallel to the Yellow Medicine River, which, by the way, is probably the most exhaustively searched river in human history. Yeah, they have definitely scoured that river for his body.
And it's not really a river so much as like
it's more of a creek.
Although it's
not something
high at that time.
Yeah, well, there would have been there's probably still some snow runoff or spring runoff, that kind of thing.
But we're not talking like a roaring 15-foot deep, 10-foot wide river. We're talking like a creek that you might get your feet up to your knees. I mean,
well, it's one of those things where if you fall into it, you could definitely bash your head on a rock and wind up with your face underwater and drown.
But it wouldn't also wash you away. Your body would probably be there.
It could. It's not a creek.
It could wash you a little ways, but it's like
not away forever is the question I'm trying to.
Well, no, it's been characterized by locals as being more of a creek than a river.
Okay.
I
just want to clarify, it's not something that would just wash a human away
for hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, at one point, the bloodhound it followed his track through this field, and then at one point it actually went to the Yellow Medicine River and jumped into the river, which led people to believe that Brandon maybe had fallen in. But then it climbed back out of the river and it picked up his track again, and his track went all the way up to 160th Avenue, which is, by the way, not an avenue. It's a gravel road, just like all the other gravel roads we've been talking about, and it's on a section line. And the trail ended at the road. So my theory is that Brandon was abducted by aliens.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
It totally. Well, actually, no. There were no burn marks from their reaction to the thrusters. There were no crop circles, even though there were lots of crops nearby. And why would aliens not leave crop circles?
Exactly.
So okay, let's discard that theory. But a more likely theory is the trail vanished because on the morning of May 14th.
This is why the trail ended at the road.
This is why possibly the trail ended at the road. There are other possibilities, but that particular road was regraded that morning. Yeah, bad timing.
Yeah, really bad timing.
Was just that road regraded, or were more roads in the area? I never could find.
Yeah, I couldn't find exactly which ones were regraded, and so I mean, obviously, if the other roads, like if the roads that the bloodhound followed him on, were also regraded, and that didn't erase his scent, which is entirely possible. It's entirely possible you can come along and just sort of rearrange the gravel a little bit, and it doesn't destroy the scent.
The only reason I was asking is because I was wondering if they were regrading everything in that area. How did the guy driving the grader not notice a car in the ditch? That's why I'm inclined to believe that only a few roads, they were doing the whole area.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've got to guess it was a local regrading, not the county or whoever.
Yeah, I really don't know, and it might very well be that the guy did notice a car in the ditch, and he actually called the sheriff's department and reported it.
Well, or maybe didn't even call. I mean, you grew up in a small town with ditches around. Did you, every time you saw a truck in the ditch, did you call the cops and say, "Oh, there's a truck in this ditch," or did you just say,
Property owners did.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's in the ditch on your property.
Weren't a lot of the farms around there abandoned? Just the one that he cut across?
It actually seems like it was mostly all being... There was that one abandoned farm that he cut across, but
that was the only one.
At the time, I don't really know, but it doesn't seem like there were that many abandoned farms.
I guess, it would be my inclination to say that, if it's a town where there's lots of college kids kind of driving through the area, you wouldn't necessarily... If you saw a car in a ditch, you woke up the next morning, you'd go, is there somebody in there? No? Okay, great, bye.
No.
They'll come for it.
It's not, somebody will take care of it. Obviously, people are motivated to retrieve their cars.
Yeah.
And if it's there 3 days later, well, then obviously you want to go out and pour lighter fluid on it
and burn it.
Fire.
Yeah.
Or call a wrecker, one of the two.
Yeah, something like that. Oh, where was I, though? So the search for Brandon has been going on ever since, and it's been a very intensive search. The last big push was in October 2015. A lot of people searched the Mud Creek area northwest of Porter. And I don't really know if Brandon would have made it that far. I don't know why he would have actually gone anywhere beyond Porter. But apparently it's some HRD dogs.
Is Mud Creek northwest?
Mud Creek
or
is
west of it, I should say?
Mud Creek is kind of hard to find on the map. It's kind of north of Porter.
Okay.
And
so he would have passed Porter.
Yeah. And the thought is, of course, the watershed from Mud Creek is much bigger than Mud Creek itself. They're thinking some HRD dogs and HRD, human remains detection dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a bloodhound which can follow your scent, and then there's these other specially trained dogs that can smell a dead body. These HRD dogs have scented something in Mud Creek. So they're thinking somewhere in the Mud Creek watershed there's a corpse, and so they've been searching it. And again,
and I know that part of the reason they were thinking that far is that they based the distance that a normal person can walk in a certain amount of time, and then they created their whole area that they were going to look in based on that.
Yeah,
and that's how they got to it.
I think at some point, you just kind of say, well, okay, you know what, he could have walked. If you're still looking 10, 15 years later, you're not just saying, well, he would have stopped in Porter, so why didn't he stop in Porter? You're saying, I don't know, he could have walked to Wisconsin for all I know, and
you don't really know. I mean,
so you're going to start searching all that stuff, I think.
I don't doubt there probably is a corpse somewhere in that watershed. I don't know if it's Brandon or not, but apparently
it wouldn't surprise me.
Also at one point, and I'm not sure exactly when, but at some point, much more recently in 2008, 5 different HRD dogs showed a very intense interest in a field cultivator, like a tiller, which is kind of gruesome to think about. But somebody, not necessarily even Brandon, but somebody apparently got tilled into the soil in one of those fields around there.
That's possible. There's a lot of things that get spread on fields for fertilizing. So it could very well be
maybe
a combination.
somebody got thrown in the fertilizer, or I think I'm gonna assume that the human remains detection dogs are smart enough and well trained enough to only be detecting dead things, but it's possible that they just detect human, things like blood, like those things. So like if somebody got their foot cut off on accident.
If there was a farm accident.
If there was a farm accident.
I gotta say that farm accidents are very, very common.
Yeah, they are.
And they probably don't send the cultivator back to the factory to be sterilized.
No.
When somebody gets his arm torn off, it's
So for me,
I understand. That's
on the
true.
one hand, I do want to assume that the dogs would be smart enough to just ignore that, but also I don't necessarily know why they would be smart enough to ignore that. I don't know what they're trained
to react to.
So it's possible
like
that somebody got their arm pulled off, and that's way less gruesome. Somehow.
Yeah, well, it's still pretty gruesome.
Or even somebody just cut themselves while working on the piece of machinery.
I mean, it would have been probably a pretty big cut.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So.
I have cut my arm pretty badly, and though it wasn't a big scarring wound, it was a bleeder, and so I bled everywhere as I was trying to staunch the flow. So then I can see something like that.
Again, I guess I just assume that it's more than blood that those dogs are detecting.
And that's an assumption that it's hard to say is that correct or not. That's all I'm saying.
Well, okay. I'm not going to get into all the details of all the searches. There's been a lot of them. And again,
it seems like almost 1 or 2 a year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Since he disappeared.
Yeah, and as I said again, the Yellow Medicine River is everybody's favorite theory. He fell into the river, and that's been thoroughly scoured. And I'm pretty sure he didn't fall into the river. But let's talk about our theories about what happened. First theory is that Brandon fell into the Yellow Medicine River and drowned. And people on various websites have sort of said that maybe he got swept downstream, his body got pinned under a rock, and that's why it's never been found. But there's a few problems with this that I have. Of course, as I just said, the river's been very, very thoroughly searched.
Right.
And the HRD dogs, again, human remains detection dogs, have sniffed the river, and they haven't picked up any trace of a body in the river. And at his OS moments, he was close to the river, but the river at that place, if you look at the area, you can see this. It's actually lined with trees and brush and underbrush and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
Because you can't farm up to the bank of any body of water.
Yeah, no. And Brandon's objective was to reach 160th Avenue as quickly as possible. That's why he took his shortcut. And that's when he had his OS moment.
Well, but he was cutting across the field to head towards the light that he saw in the distance, not necessarily the road. He didn't know where 168th was exactly.
160th? Well, he knew it was up there.
Yeah, but he also, I mean, if he decided to cut across the field, he said, "Screw this! I'm tired of going up and up and left, up and left. So I'm just going to go straight towards it." So he wasn't. He could have been heading that direction and not straight up
but
to the road.
He wouldn't go into the trees, though, is my point.
But did he know that 160th was up there? He thought he was in a totally different place.
He didn't know what road was up there. That's why I'm saying he was heading towards the light of the town that he saw in the distance.
Yeah, and
he didn't know what road. He didn't care what road because his idea was cut across this crap.
No, but Brandon made the quite reasonable. He'd walked a half mile up this road before he cut across the field. He made the quite reasonable assumption that, again, these roads are every mile on the section lines. So he made the reasonable assumption that there was a road right over there, and he cut across that field. And again, why would he go into the woods and tumble into the river when?
Why wouldn't he?
Why wouldn't he? Because going into the woods is not part of the mission. His mission was to get to the next road.
But he doesn't know what's in the woods. He doesn't know if it's just is it copse or corpse of trees?
Copse of trees.
Copse of trees. He doesn't know if it's just because it's pitch black. There's no moon at this point.
Yeah, the
he's
moon is
legally
set.
blind in one eye, so his depth perception is really poor.
Yeah, no.
He has no idea what's in there. So you're looking at a map and saying, well, obviously he had to be doing this, but he could have had no idea and thought, that's a little bunch of trees. I'll just go through it.
I feel like every reason that you just gave is a reason for him to not go in there. Because he doesn't know, because he doesn't know what's through there. And if I know anything, it's that when you start cutting through trees, you're no longer walking in a straight line.
Yeah, exactly.
There's stuff in your way.
And his track mostly paralleled the Yellow Medicine River. It didn't really intersect it. Except the dog did run over and jump in the river. That made everybody think he fell into the river, but I don't see why he would have.
So here's the thing. Joe is forgetting something, and you haven't had this experience, which is being a peeved off 19-year-old dude who just says, F it, I know what I'm doing, I'm going there, nothing's getting in my
and I guess
way.
that is the other truth, is that if he was walking down it for so long, he was walking parallel to it, and he was like, oh my god, I'm never going to find a bridge.
Decisions as a very young man, and they were very dumb. And he could have just said, you know what, I can make it. He's overconfident in his abilities to navigate through it in the dark.
Possible.
So,
possible.
now,
but
I don't think he's in the river, but